Our return was met with a gorgeous view, one that rendered both of us utterly speechless. The petals of cherry blossoms danced in the sunlit breeze, twirling their scent in the summer air. The scenery was so breathtaking, it almost felt like we'd stepped into a fantastical world. Were we dreaming? Hijikata-san, how are you feeling? He forced a small grin. As a Fury, he should have been fully healed by now. Amakiri's words about Furies borrowing their power from their future lifespan suddenly came to mind. I slowly began to panic, becoming paralyzed with dread over the implications of this realization. Was this the end for Hijikata-san? Hijikata-san broke the silence, interrupting my anxiety. Huh? I looked up at him, perplexed by his words. You really think so? I've always thought they really suited you, though. Each fallen petal was strikingly beautiful, in defiance of the tragic end they would surely face. I felt like there was a striking resemblance to his life, aiming to be the ideal warrior as he put his life on the line. A strong gust of wind blew through the field. I could smell the faint scent of cherry blossoms as they suddenly scattered through the wind. Then, out of nowhere, his eyes fell on Hijikata-san, and his mouth curled up in a smile. Why? My voice broke, but Kazuma only laughed. At Utsunomiya Castle, Kazuma warned us that he'd return. However, I never thought he would forsake his clan and travel all the way to Edo. It should be Ezo, just to fight Hijikata-san.
よくぞこの地までたどり着いたものだな。ただのまがいもの風情が。東国での戦は敗走に次ぐ敗走だったと聞いている。たとえ武家の生まれの者でも、いや、鬼として生を受けた者でも、あれほどの苦難を乗り越えることはできぬだろうな。
That was a little surprising. His tone was as derisive as usual, but his words were almost compliments. Backhanded to be sure, but praise of a sort nonetheless. In some way, he recognized what Hijikata-san had been through.
まさか本当にエゾまで来るとはな。俺が途中で死んでたらどうするつもりだったんだ。とんだ無駄足じゃねえか。
His face twisted into a crooked grin. And then he drew his sword out. Please, wait! Hijikata-san is currently gravely hurt! If he fought in his condition, he'd surely die. I stepped in front of Hijikata-san, between him and Kazuma. However, he moved his arm in front of me. But...
こいつは何もかも投げ打って俺を追ってきたんだろう。なら、その心意気に応えてやるのが誠の武士ってもんじゃねえか。
That's... Kazuma had practically abandoned his clan. This, up until now, seemed to me to be his entire life, just for the sake of defending his honor. Hijikata-san and Kazuma were different men in almost every way, but perhaps they shared a warrior's pride.
平気だよ。俺は死なねえ。死ねねえ理由ができたって言ったじゃねえか。
He just suffered a serious injury, and his lifespan might be used up. If he fights Kazuma, then surely by then his life would be up. Even if I could convince him to run, then everything he'd stood for and lived for would be destroyed. No, I couldn't do that. Fine. I'll just watch. I believe in you. Hijikata-san smiled. His smile was fleeting, like the scattered blossoms floating in the summer wind.
羅刹など所詮はまがいもの。ただでさえ短い寿命を削ったとて、その力は我ら純血の鬼にはかなわ
The cherry blossom continued to dance around us, eventually falling upon Kazuma's golden hair.
貴様らは知りゆく定めにある。生き急ぐ様はまるで桜のようだ。
生き急いでるわけじゃねえ。必要とされるものが多かっただけだ。新選組が理想とする武士の道は険しいんでな。
Hijikata-san's tone seemed to indicate he was speaking seriously, but I saw his lips curl into a sardonic grin. All those challenges were just opportunities for him to climb the hill and achieve his life's goal. Watching him now made me see just how much he'd given, every drop of sweat, blood, and tears in his life to protect the ones he loves. After some silence, Kazuma muttered,
羅刹というまがいものの名は貴様の生き様にはふさわしくないな。
Perhaps there was no hint of contempt left in those red eyes of his, full of confidence.
貴様はもはや一人の鬼だ。
Kazuma, the man who took pride in being a demon. He called Hijikata-san, who drank the water of life and became a fake, as Kazuma called them, a demon. I think for him, this was the highest possible compliment he ever could have given.
まがいものという評価は取り下げよう。貴様の存在に敬意を表し、鬼としての名をくれてやる。白鸚記だ。
Hakuoki, a name bestowed upon Hijikata-san by Kazuma, offered as a token of acceptance from a demon to a fury. Did they just drop the name? Oh my god. My mind went back to the first night I met Hijikata-san. His hair was flowing in the night's wind, and I remember thinking it looked as if it was cherry blossoms scattering furiously in the night air. It seemed almost as if the name had been chosen long, long ago. So perfectly did it fit him.
鬼として認められるために戦ってきたわけじゃねえんだがな。
His mouth crooked up in a smile as he slid his sword from its sheath. With a sigh, his body shivered, and suddenly his hair was white.
長くは遊んでやれねえが、それでいいだろう。
構わぬ。人たちで仕留めてくれよ。
Kazuma nodded, his own sword sliding from its scabbard. It was already out, though. The air was tense between the two. Not a soul could have come between them. I think the battle would be settled in an instant. They stood apart from one another, still as statues. The wind blew up, casting scores of petal into the air. Between the two combatants, there was a brief moment of stillness. In the next instant, they both leapt forward. If only for a second, their swords met. The two traded blows that thundered through the field around us, slashing with their full body weight. Kazuma's sword passed within a hair's breadth of Hijikata-san's. But Hijikata-san's blade found its mark. He buried his sword deep into the demon's heart.
守らなきゃならねえものがあるんだ。たとえ鬼にだろうと負けられねえんだよ。
Hijikata-san's voice carried with it a confident authority. Kazuma gazed up towards the sky, and I could almost see a faint grin creep into his face. His lips moved.
貴様のような鬼と戦い、生き絶えるのであれば。
Even with his heart skewered by Hijikata-san's blade, he could still talk. He put on a brave smile as he spoke.
何を食いることがあろうか。俺は誇り高き鬼としての生を全うした。
His eyes were clear and free of hostility. If anything, he seemed at peace. To die in a duel against a foe he respected, it was a death he could accept with grace.
お前は俺に勝った男だ。残り少ないその命を存分に生かすのだな。白鸚記よ。
They were his last words. Hijikata-san drew his sword out of Kazuma's body as it fell, dropping the still bloody sword back into its scabbard.
生きてやるさ。
Then Hijikata-san's body trembled for a second, and he gasped before falling to his knees. Hijikata-san! I ran to his side. Hijikata-san! Hijikata-san! Please, hang in there! My desperate screams reverberated around us, but Hijikata-san could only manage to uncertain lip curl. Damn it.
相変わらず泣き虫だな、お前は。そんな調子じゃ武家の女房なんて務まらねえぜ。
He winced as he spoke, and my heart clenched in my chest watching him suffer in so much pain. How many times could I possibly watch him push himself beyond his limits? I only cry because of you, Hijikata-san. And besides, being married to a warrior doesn't make you impervious to watching the person you love get hurt. Teardrops streamed down my blushed cheeks, dripping down upon Hijikata-san's tender face. He reached his hands unsteadily to wipe my flowing tears, kindly running a finger across my cheek.
安心しろ。これからはこんな風にお前を泣かせることもねえよ。これからの時間はお前のことだけを考えて
Hijikata-san's eyes quietly shut. I held tightly onto his blood-soaked body, hugging him closely as the blood seeped into my shirt. Bright, glowing blossoms danced coolly above us. That's how it ends! That's okay. Okay. Oh, we got one, okay. Let's do it. Oh. Hijikata-san didn't reach Benton Fortress. Even with the reinforcements Hijikata-san had sent, the fortress couldn't hold against the Imperial Army and surrendered. Eventually, they took Hokodate as well, and the army of the Republic of Ezo was forced to surrender. It was done. Just as spring came to Ezo, the war the Shinsengumi had fought for so long came to an end. I heard later that it had been Otori who convinced the army to surrender peacefully. Better to live and see the future than die and be denied it. Just the sort of thing I expected from Otori. The Imperial Army recognized Enomoto's skill and spared his life, sending him to prison instead of the executioner. Somehow, Shimada survived the final fierce battle. He escaped unscathed. When I asked what he intended to do, he laughed and said he'd probably open a school of swordsmanship in Kyoto. Soma, on the other hand, was entrusted by Hijikata with the Shinsengumi, turned himself into the Imperial Army, and, last I heard, has been detained as chief. As for Iba, before the Battle of Goryokaku Castle, he tragically took his own life with a bottle of morphine given to him by Enomoto. Whoa. If he were to have survived but surrendering to the Imperial Army, his life would have been forfeited anyway. I suppose for Iba, this was the ultimate sacrifice that a warrior in his position could make. I watched the cherry blossoms bloom around me, recalling everything that happened back in Ezo. How many lives were lost in this land? How many patriots had fought and died for what they'd believe in? But perhaps most of all, I remember the time I spent with Hijikata-san. They're so beautiful. Pirouetting and dancing on each breeze of wind, the cherry petals brushed against my skin like silk. Each one brought a tiny whiff of the smell of new life. Whenever I see the colors of spring, I remember a wonderful time. The time he spent by my side.
お前、本当に桜が好きなんだな。
Neither the plum flowers nor the tree peony could compare to their beauty. After all, the reason I liked cherry blossoms was... I like them because they remind me of you. He looked at me in serene contemplation for a moment, then let his grin spread across his face into a smile. His eyes narrowed before he softly murmured,
俺も好きだよ。お前に似合うからな。
His voice soft and quiet throws my mind into chaos. My face was flushed with color and I turned away. The way he whispered so intimately, so sweetly. There was no way I could possibly hide how I felt about him. I doubt I'll ever grow used to his voice. The very sound of it makes my heart flutter.
最近、お わりが来るのが怖くなった。
Hmm? My voice shook as I tried to figure out what he meant by that.
お前との暮らしは飽きねえからな。ずっと生き続けてって思うことがある。
Oh. As a fury, Hijikata-san had spent his future in exchange for power in the present. How much he had spent, we couldn't know. His life could end tomorrow. If he could live forever, then that fear of the unknown would disappear. But I knew that could never be.
てめえの運命を潔く受け入れて散るってのも綺麗な死に様かもしれねえな。終わりを求める必要なんざねえよ。生きてえからあがき続ける。そっちの方が性に合ってる。
His vigorous voice gave me courage. I don't want us to be apart. I would stay and fight with him until the end was at last upon us. I wanted to look death in the eye and say we'd made the most of what we had. I want to stay with you as long as I can.
お前はすぐに泣くからなおさら置いていけねえ気がするんだよ。
He was right. Tears had begun to roll down my cheeks without me noticing at first. I blinked in surprise, but that hardly helped. Sorry, Hijikata-san. I rushed to wipe the tears away, but he grinned and stopped me.
いいんだよ。お前の涙を拭うのは俺の役目だ。
And he did, with kindness and with love. Then it's my job to support you too, right?
当たり前じゃねえか。お前以外の誰にそんな真似ができるってんだ。どんだけ突き放しても聞かねえ。しまいには蝦夷地まで追いかけてきやがる。お前には負けたよ。この先一生勝てる気がしねえ。
Surrounded by cherry blossoms, we sat as springtime returned to the north. Next year, and the year after that, I wanted to watch spring unfold with him. I wanted more happy memories like this one. And I wanted the day that we would be separated to never come. That was cute. I don't know how to feel. I still don't know how to feel. Achievement unlocked. Hakuoki. Not Hakuoki. Hakuoki.